Meg, are you recording? You're
I
recording.
just got it recorded. Yep.
Okay. So hi, everyone. Welcome. So good to see you here always, each week. So this week we are going to continue our conversation around whiteness, go a little bit more into what it means to why it's so difficult for us, most of us here as white folk, for white folk in general, to have conversations about racism. And, to really connect the conversation around this to our tradition of yoga. I was telling Meg yesterday, as I was preparing to begin this call, I was like, God, I feel a little bit like a charlatan getting ready to step in front of a bunch of people and talk about something that, if I'm being totally honest, I've been pretty uneducated and ignorant around, as far as actual politically correct contemporary modern conversation. And I got myself 2 books last week, and I've been reading them, and I've been looking on social media and reading articles, and it's like, so what, I'm just going to get up here and regurgitate someone else's information that I'm learning to be able to make my own, but wouldn't really very much feel truthful to be my own, I'm learning all sorts of new terms, and I could write them all down like I started to. You ever done this when you got most of your teachers on here? It's like, oh yeah, I got this thing, and I'm going to write this part down. I'm going to write this part down. I'm going to tell all this information while I'm teaching or while I'm learning. It's like, but it's not actually mine yet. So I was definitely having my own kind of insecurities around that. And then Meg and I had the conversation of well, guess what? This gets to be uncomfortable for us. It doesn't get to be a comfortable situation or conversation. And that's part of the engagement of this. And, what we can do is go, and what I know I can do is go back to what is familiar to me, what I do know, what I can use as a touchstone that helps me in my kind of North Star alignment, which is the tradition of yoga, And for me, one of the most potent sacred texts for me in yoga is the Bhagavad Gita, and there's been some conversation I've seen out there, and maybe we've had it with people around us, about how, yoga isn't a political tradition and doesn't kind of invite us or require us to necessarily take a political stance. Anyone who's read the Bhagavad Gita knows that the entire Bhagavad Gita is literally about taking particular stance in society and in the world. Moral stance, ethical stance, even stance around human rights, because literally the Bhagavad Gita is engaged on a battlefield. And it is about being in a battle that every other, you start at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita with the understanding that every other pathway has been exhausted. Every other pathway towards harmony, towards rationalization, towards making it work, has been exhausted. And so Krishna is driving the chariot, where Arjuna, who is the leader of his family, is just they drive to the center of the battlefield, get ready to sound the conch of the battle, and Arjuna is just sinks down. He's just I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And Krishna's too bad. This is your dharma. This is what you are here to do. Here you are. You have been born into this particular caste system. India is, in a caste system, which, not that we have to agree with it, but it is the lens with which we're looking through. And that because of the birth that you were born into, you have certain dharma. You have a certain right, certain responsibilities towards action. And Arjuna was just really moping. and kind of just like, I really don't want to, this doesn't, this is like, I don't want to kill, I don't want to engage in battle with my family. I don't want to do this. Like, I just want to, he just kind of slumps down, and he's just like, I'm frozen, I can't act. And so one of the great lines that gets quoted a lot in the Gita is about how, it is impossible not to act. That even our inaction is an action. So even our inaction is an action. He goes on to say that action is actually more superior than inaction because it requires us to take on not only an internal action, but an action that subsumes and involves the entirety of our being. We actually bring it into the earth of us, into the body of us. There's more subtle conversations in there that says that even in action, there is inaction. So we could be acting and doing all of these things and running around and researching and posting and talking. And even in our action, we have to be mindful of where we're still being inactive. And that, of course, even in our what sometimes looks like an outward experience of inaction, of stillness, of meditation, of quiet, of prayer, that there is still action. That's like one sentence of the entire text. It's pretty layered and pretty deep. And so we are all tied up within, like it's called the ksetra. I have such a hard time pronouncing it. The field, the battlefield, the field of that which we live in is the field of our embodied existence, is the grounds with which we are here engaging in this conversation, the grounds with which society has come to, with which our world has come to, with which we have been raised in and are now waking up to, or have been waking up to in a different, in different ways for many years. And so, the word karma actually means action. I think most of us probably know that, and it's okay if you forgot that and don't know that. But the word karma means action. My teacher Douglas says that, karma is the principle of understanding that the world responds to whatever it is that you do or don't do. Because even in your not doing, you're doing. So that continues to go to understand that no right effort, in our practice goes without, I don't want to use the word reward, but it's never lost. Like your effort is never lost. Because what I want to acknowledge on that is that sometimes, I know in myself starting to do some of this research, it's like, oh, I start to find something that I feel like I'm getting along. And it's like, oh, you're actually being even more racist right now. When you're doing that, you're like, oh God, it's so deep inside of me. Like, what? And then you're just like, am I even getting anywhere? Or can I even wake up from this sickness? Or, like what's even going on? But this understanding that everything that we do, the world is responding to it. So our effort, when we go in with intention, when we go in with an open heart, even if we're stumbling and we're falling and we're figuring it out, the world is responding. The universe is responding to that effort. So your effort towards this, your effort towards waking up, your effort towards owning where you have been inactive, owning where even in your action you've been inactive, owning and starting to look and see and wake up with new eyes to, like, where do I benefit from this system that I haven't even realized? Where have I not been willing to sacrifice? That any effort that we make towards this, any action that we make towards this, and really understanding that nuance, that really seeing where even in our action we're being inactive, just allows us to begin to step into understanding how we have been contributing to something, what it actually means to be white in this world, what it actually means, from a power standpoint, to have been born white into this world, not because it's superior, but because the structure of our society has somehow created this belief where actually there's an understanding in the yoga tradition that all beings and all things are equal. There's equanimity, there's equality within equanimity. But because of the social structures of our world, we have been granted a certain type of power that I think a lot of us don't want to have, because we are like, oh my God, having this power sucks. This power is fraught with, anger, with rape, with destruction, with injustice. And like, I don't want it. I don't want it to be my power. I'd rather, this is my experience. As I'm seeking to go back into these texts, this is a real insight into me of like, wow, this is a real reflection of what's going on in the Bhagavad Gita, of like, sometimes we are handed a certain dharma, we are handed a certain responsibility that just feels heavy and feels like I don't want it. And the answer is kind of, too bad, it's yours. What will you do with it? And this is our practice of yoga, right? To actually step into the fullness of our being and to step in the fullness of who we are, to do the Caroline Neese has a beautiful definition of shadow work. And this for me has come so like blaring strong in this white privilege conversation. She says, shadow work is just, our shadow parts of ourselves are just the part of ourselves that we don't know yet. And I'm having just at least a personal recognition of that, of just like, oh my God, there's all these parts of myself that are completely fraught with privilege, that are benefiting from this imbalanced and unjust system. And I need to know that part of myself in order to be able to heal that, to release that. I want to touch, before we move a little bit deeper and just kind of contemplate this in meditation, I don't want to go too deep here, but I want to touch on, a little bit of the resistance that I'm experiencing from friends, from family members. We've experienced some within the community, some on social media, about putting this conversation in the forefront right now. This could be a whole other conversation, and I don't think we need to go there, but I just want to acknowledge it because it is mine, and I know Meg's belief that our conversation here is the same and our work is the same, depending, no matter how, what I'm going to say kind of sits for you. We're in a world situation right now where it's really hard to trust anything that we see on the television. It's really hard to know what is happening in the world. We went from, and are by all means still within, a worldwide pandemic, where the conversation around that is fraught with so many questions, whether you want to call them conspiracy theories, different perspectives. We don't know what to believe necessarily. Not knowing what to believe creates separation within, people are kind of battling and arguing within, like, oh, should you be wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or should we be following this or not doing this? So there's that kind of friction there, where we don't necessarily trust what we see. We don't necessarily trust what we read. We don't know what to trust. We have maybe some friction with people around us about their beliefs and their kind of engagement around it. And then, for this to arise, for George Floyd's killing to arise, and for massive uprising, and then a big kind of media focus also going on racism, which by all means is very, very, very important. I think that is central to this. And, you know, this is why we are here having this conversation. But there's also conversations I'm hearing a lot of and seeing a lot of questioning around the media of if like we're all getting very focused on something else while something else is, you know, politically kind of happening in the background. Who knows, you know, probably all of it's true. You know, I can't claim to, you know and understand. That's another beautiful part of the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 11, where Arjuna is begging to know the full truth and begging to see the whole truth. Tell me absolutely everything. Show me everything. Show me, you know, the truth of the universe. And Krishna reveals the truth of the universe to him. And he's like, take it away. It's too much to be able to handle. You know, it's this recognition that he's like, even if I were to show you the truth of absolutely everything and all of its disaster and all of its glory and all of its beauty and all of its catastrophe, your work here, Arjuna, is still the same. Your dharma, your karma here in this world is still the same, to take right action in service of the highest, in service of the recognition of equanimity, equality for all beings and all things, to use the fullness of your power to do good in the world. So that, again, those conversations, I just want to acknowledge that, because I've seen on some of your social media things, as you post these things, people are coming in and kind of bringing these questions in as well. I just want to give a little bit of a thread there. Happy to have the conversation as we continue onward. Just that even with our difficulty in knowing how to discern truth and what is really going on in the world, what we do know and what we can do is invite in the strength of our power and our privilege to be able to have these conversations, to be able to sit safely in our homes, to acknowledge those things as privilege and to use them as tools for good the best that we can. And the tools of self-reflection particularly is where we want to, you know, we have to look at first. I'm listening to the Michael Jackson song, Man in the Mirror, the past 3 days, you know, that if we want to create change, we have to look directly within ourselves, you know, and we can all go out here and fight and argue and look for more information and blah, 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 and get super distracted. But what we're getting distracted away from is actually doing the hard, difficult, painful work of understanding what it means to be white in this world. You know. So, we're going to go into meditation, and I'm just going to play a couple of verses of chanting from the Bhagavad Gita, particularly about how we cannot engage in, there's no way to avoid action, that every act, even inaction, is an action, and that it is our dharma, our duty, to uphold the karma, to do the actions of our particular in the Gita, they kind of talk about it as like your Vedic virtues, meaning that like the way that you, with the form, with the shape that you came into this world, that it is our duty to uphold and do the work and do the actions of like the world, the privilege, the embodiment, the body, the structure that we were born into. It is our duty to do this work. So let's close your eyes, come to a comfortable upright seat. And just allow yourself to drop in here. Just kind of let everything begin to fall away. So much information out there spinning around, and I feel so many of you here, I know, in the work that you're doing and the desire we have to be good humans, to do, quote, the right thing. And sometimes in our desperation to find that, we, like we ended talking about last week, can allow ourselves to get wrapped up in the action of the research or the reading or the posting or the, talking, which is all beautiful forms of action. And that even within those forms of action, there can be an inaction, there can be a way that we are still avoiding the work, the hard work of really looking at what is true for us, and really looking at where it's difficult for us to have these conversations and why. To really reflect on what social and institutional power people with white skin hold over those of different races. To see where we are not acting, or we are not using our power. I started reading that book of How to Be Anti-Racist, and one of the things that really struck me in the beginning was he said, the opposite of racism is not racist. It's anti-racist. Anti-racist has that energy of karma behind it, the energy of action behind it. It is not an inert job, an inert role to be anti-racist, both within conversation with ourselves and outward in the world. And all the way back to about 300 AD, when the Bhagavad Gita came into form, the Bhagavad Gita means the song of the Blessed One. That there has been a song, a calling out, a cry from the universe, that its very nature for equality, for justice, for the acknowledgement of unity between all beings and all things, and that in this incarnated embodied world, the very essence of our nature, the part of us that knows our divinity, knows the divinity in all beings and all things, calls out, sings to us. To step into our power, to take action. Action that is self-reflection, like we talked about last week, svadhyaya, an action that is karma. Embodied movement into the world. So allow your skin to soften. your ears to open.
Sharira yatra pichate na prasidyeda karmanaha niyatam kuru karma tvam karmajyayokya karmanaha Sharira yatra pichate na prasidyeda karmanaha Arjuna uvacha Sannyasam karmanam Krishna Punaryogam cha shamsasi Yakshreya yetayorekam Tanme bruhi sunishchitam Niyatam kuru karma tvam Karmajyayokya karmanaha Sharira yatra pichate na prasidyeda karmanaha Niyatam kuru karma tvam Karmajyayokya karmanaha Sharira yatra pichate na prasidyeda karmanaha
Allow the reverberation of the ancient vibrations to call you home, to call you to be in service. And to be very clear, this is not to be service of saving someone else out of some aspect of privilege or supremacy, but rather to be in service of equality, justice. And to ask, where does my being in service ask me, require me, need me to sacrifice? And so to help thread that inquiry, to thread and kind of connect to where are these places where maybe we are choosing action, but within that action, still not taking action. And where are these places where we have been complicit and complacent? And we know we need to begin to act. Where this concept of being just not racist, not identifying, kind of denying that we are racist, or it is just ingrained in the very fabric of our society and our reality, where that stance is one of passivity, versus where stepping into this role of being anti-racist is a stepping into an active power, an active karma, an active action towards change. And so the big questions, and I admittedly often hear not knowing where to begin. And so let's just start with the question. Drop to yourself here for the next few moments is, what does it mean to be white in this world? What is white skin? What implications of having white skin exist in this world? What does it mean to be white? And notice any triggers that arise, emotional triggers, responses that arise to contemplating the meaning of whiteness. Many other races have very much identified with being Black or being Mexican or being indigenous. And yet oftentimes when this question is of does it mean, what meaning is it in this society? What does it mean to be white? As a group, we so often turn away from that question, thinking that to think of that is somehow admitting that we are racist. And so let's just shed a little light. Let's allow a little bit of, well, really a lot of it, but we can start with a little of that to arise. What does it mean? What are the benefits? What are some of the implicit biases or implicit legs up that we get in this world from having a color of skin that is white and not another color? How do you experience that in your life on a daily basis? And like we've done in some of these other practices, just see where that arises in your body. See where those sensations arise in the body. Notice the quality of thought. Allowing yourself to continue with that inquiry, that self-inquiry. Begin to let your eyes open. I know there's be a lot there. Maybe you've already been contemplating this and connecting since our last call, or just maybe for a really long time. I'd like to now pass the mic over to Meg. And just invite you guys, as you continue to listen, to stay kind of in the meditative state a little bit, in the sense that stay really grounded and connected into your heart center, into your breathing, as we continue to go a little deeper into the questioning, so that you can really continue to stay tuned and aware of where resistance or where trigger comes up when we enter these conversations. Meg, I'll hand it to you.
So thank you. I want to be mindful of time. I want to be able to give everybody a chance to join the conversation. So I want to keep my piece a little bit brief. There's something, so the book that Ashleigh was talking about, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. He's an amazing man and author, and he's written some other books as well that I highly recommend you check out. There's one that's called Stamped from the Beginning, and it gives the history of racism ultimately, and it gives the larger context. And for me, having read that book a while back is helping me in this conversation now, because I can see this bigger picture. But something that he says quite a lot as well, and that I want to share with you guys right now, is that he speaks about the lifeblood, the life force of racism being its denial. And, and I think, this outside of even just what he says, and I think just denial specifically by everyone, but I think right now we hold this special flavor of denial as spiritual practitioners and as good white people that we talked about a little bit last week. But that the actual beginning then of anti-racism, the beginning, and I just want to be clear that this is just the beginning, is confession. And that is so important, and that's what's at the root of this question, because, as Ashleigh was saying before, when we're talking about being on the battlefield with our families, as a white person that has been raised with racism, in order to dismantle racism, I have to see that in myself, and I have to go to battle with my family. And in what way is that going to be a skillful battle? Let's say, but also this piece of I don't, Ashleigh was saying, I don't want this, but this is our dharma. This is what we are. But also there's a part of me that does want this. I get a lot of benefits, and I have to confess that. When I think about what does it mean to be white, it means that my daughter, if there's an issue and I'm leaving her with my phone and I go for a run and I say, Lily, if something happens, what number does she call? She calls 911. That's not true for everyone. That's not even true for the people that live on the corner it's a Black family, and the father is a police officer, and their son, Talik, does not call 911 if there's a problem. So to say we don't want this, I do want this, but I want everyone to feel safe. I want everybody to feel supported and that sort of thing. But we have to confront these hard truths about what we get and how it is that we're invested in what it is and what it means to be white. And I know that's, you know, not everybody on this call has white skin. Most of us do, but also there is a perspective that everyone holds on this call about what it means to be white. And so anyways, I really want to open it up so that we do have some time to hear from everyone about what does it mean to be white. I mean, I really, it's like Ashleigh was saying, you continue to dig through the layers and you're like, whoa, it's really complex. So I really want to open it up to us. I mean, for this first step in anti-racism to be to take, like we said last week, this internal dive to use. I mean, I really want to just highlight that we sit in meditation. So like Ashleigh said, that we can stand for what's just and we can stand for equality, we can stand for justice, we can stand for love. And so we take the time in contemplation last week and throughout this whole week, but it's not to just do nothing about. That's called bypassing. And then if we just sit on our cushions to find our way to our own center and to our own awakening and our own liberation, and we just leave it at that, and we don't put it into action, that's called spiritual bypassing. We sit on our cushions and we get the boons, we get the tools of clarity, of courage, of bravery. We get the tools, we get the insights, the awakening to, oh, shit, I get a lot out of this. But that's only half the equation. So we want to like bring it to the surface again and again and again. This is not a one-time endeavor of like, what does it mean to be white? Bring that to the surface. And then how do we take skillful action for and use the things that our practice gives us? Centeredness and clarity and courage. How do we do that to deconstruct the systems of racism in ourselves and in our families and in our world, and build a new world that we can live in that is of true equality, that shows truly that we love everyone. So I just want to open it up to hear from the community. What, you know, the answer to that question, and to the answer, perhaps you were on the call last week and you spent the week kind of in contemplation, but what does it mean to be white in the world today? And I think you guys have to raise your hands, and then I think it seemed like I have to unmute you. So you can raise your blue hand on the screen or your actual physical hand if you have your video on, and I can unmute you. No one. So, and I think it's interesting that we, you know, we haven't maybe thought about this enough. Put race as like something else. Okay, I see you, Kim. You know, so like white is a race too. And so it's so interesting how as white folks are like, oh, white is the people of color, or race is the people of color. Okay, so Kimberly, I saw that you, here, I'm gonna see if I can unmute you. Okay, there we go. You're up, hon.
I just wanna say thank you. I mean, this is interesting for me because I am so white and so embarrassed to be an American and white that when I was 18, I left America and wanted to get away from being white and being so privileged, and found myself living with, you know, all the poorest people I can find. And then people all over the world would take me in because I was American, because I was white. So that meant I was smart. And so I was always privileged, even though I wanted to escape it because I felt this thing. So it's interesting. I could get a job in a third world country and I could be like, everybody would praise me because I was white and I was American. I can maybe help them because I spoke English. But I do want to say, I feel really like this guilt inside me, because even though I hated being American, I hated being white, I still took advantage of it because I'm like, oh, I could do anything. So it's really hard because it's so ingrained in us that we're white, we're privileged, we could do anything we want. And it's really quite hard to say, you're not racist. I grew up with a father that was so racist that I just wanted to run away from it. But it's so ingrained in me that, like, well, I can do anything because I am American, I am white, I could go and travel and work in 30 countries. So I absolutely feel it's so torn being inside and being white. I'm absolutely no better being white or being American or smarter or wiser. I don't know where to go with it. I wanted to keep it away from my young children about everything that was going on because I didn't want to get them involved, and to the point where I was like, what am I doing? I'm going to have this conversation. And so then they started to do the research about whose name are they going to write and sit in Truckee in a peaceful protest. And they're baffled by it because I have never had the conversation, with them. So that's just where I stand. I wanted to just share my story with you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I don't think that there's anybody on this call that would even, disagree with that, with all of that. I think that that's the whole thing, is we just have to see it and we have to confess it. And that's the first thing. And I feel like guilt and shame get pushed away. Like we're in this time where we're like, oh, let's eradicate shame or guilt or whatever. And I would say yes, if guilt and, if you just stop there. But I feel like guilt and shame are really powerful pointers to where we are maligned, where we're misaligned, and how we can use that guilt to spur us into a new direction. And, just in your story, I hear you, Kimberly, like it's like with our kids, it's like we have the benefit and the privilege of not having to have this conversation with our children until it gets kind of awkward, versus, people of color have to have this conversation with their kids early on. There's a really beautiful letter in the book, I'm Still Here, that was written by Austin Channing Brown, that she wrote to her unborn child. And she's a Black woman. And she wrote in the letter all of the things that I would write to my unborn child. And then there was this segment in there about, how she didn't want yet to think about the conversation she was going to have with her unborn child when they were well too young, that she didn't want to have to do that, but she was going to have to do it. And it just, that letter undid me, because that's our privilege. And we can run away from our power all that we want. It doesn't mean that we don't have it. And what Ashleigh was saying at the beginning of the conversation, which is super important, and this is also part of the yoga tradition, when we look at actual brahmacharya, it's appropriation of power, acknowledging the power that we have, and then using it accordingly. If you have power and you're not using it for equality and for justice and whatever, and you're just running away from it, that's the bypassing of things. We are going to be the ones that have to take this system down. The people in power, when it was women were working for their right to vote, it was the men that ultimately had to grant them the right to vote, And I'm not saying that it's ultimate, it's us, and like we hold ultimate power over anyone. But this is a system that white folks built that we continue to perpetuate by not confessing to it. And so how can we use the power and the privilege that we have to dismantle the power and the privilege that we have over someone? you know, so, but I hear you, to run from it. We all want to hide from it, which is why the confession is the first thing. And I'm so, you know, grateful that you did, Kimberly. And it's just like, that's, your story is the white story. We've got another hand here. Okay, Sabrina.
Oh, you have to unmute. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So my adult son has been involved in Black Lives Matter for a couple of years. So I've been having this conversation with him. And what's interesting is February, before everything happened, I bought this book. And it actually is how to have a conversation. And it's really good. It's written by a Black queer woman from Seattle. And he told me and my friend the other day, the best thing that we could do is to go to our local city council meetings, mayors and police departments, and get funding diverted from police to homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health. So that's what he says I can do in my community.
Great.
As a woman of privilege.
Thank you.
That's super helpful. I think Nicole has had her hand up for a while.
Okay, let's unmute Nicole. Okay, Nicole.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. I am so grateful for this, especially the focus on the confession. So I want to share my confession, which is like really hard to say, but I think it's so important. And before I do it, I'm just getting so much out of this, in that like, it's so important to take action, like Ashleigh and Meg, you're saying, and getting lost in that, and not getting lost in, okay, well, like I'm checking off the boxes, like I'm having this conversation, I'm reading this, but it's like, what do you confess though, right? Like, so just thank you for that. Like, I want to confess that I have lived my life telling myself that I am not racist, that I care about all people, that I don't see color because I see people's heart and I love them. And in that has been so much silence, so much of my white silence, and so much quiet, and so much just standing on the edge of something that I see that I know is not okay, but I'm silent. And that's not who I want to be anymore. That's not aligned to my heart. And that's not okay that I told myself those things. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nicole. The silence is, and we know this, and this is why we say this, and it's really important to acknowledge how our silence is killing that which we love. We love our Black brothers and sisters. We love our Indigenous brothers and sisters. We love the people of color. We love, I love my mother-in-law who's Japanese, and I love, just all of these, we love all of them deeply, and our silence is killing them. Physically, mentally, emotionally. And so, I really hear you, Nicole, in saying, and not anymore. I have been, and not anymore. And the book that Sabrina was just holding up, it's like, how do we then not be silent? It's tricky because, I find myself, in these conversations, and like, sometimes I'll be on, and right now with all of this, coming up, and I'll be on the phone with, other moms or whatever. And a part of me is like holding, like, oh gosh, I hope that this doesn't come up in this conversation, because I don't want to have to, broach this topic. And then that's a racist thing. Like, that's my silence and my comfortability. And, versus going like, versus saying, so how are you and your kids talking about racism right now? And actually being the one to bring it up and then have the uncomfortable pause on the other end of the line. But there are some tools and some resources to help your conversations then be skillful, you know. And the book that I have that one as well, as though you want to talk about race. I don't know, maybe Sabrina, could you put a link to that book, or just, oh, here, I can type it up in here. So you want to talk about race, but there, you know, get your resources. But even, you know, the thing.
She put it in there, Meg, just so you know. It's already in.
Oh, she did. Okay, sorry. Oh, great. There are some resources for you. And the other thing is this is a huge thing that I want to point out, is that you're not going to get it perfect. But the risk of staying quiet because you're not going to get it perfect is far too big of a risk. And the people who are paying the cost of our silence is not us. And I think that we need to know that. I think we do know that, and we do understand that. So thank you to speaking to something that I think is so true for so many white people who want to be able to say something, but they can't and they won't, because, you know, it's really hard and it's really uncomfortable, but the cost is just, it's too much. We have to say something, and we have to continue to have the conversation, and we have to continue to say something when and if the protests die down and there's not that place to put your voice, in a place that's a little bit, that's, the protests are an easier place for us to put our voice, right? But don't fall silent when it's no longer headline news. And that's, you know, that's what I have to pray for myself every day, is to not fall silent when it's no longer headline news, to continue to speak out against oppression, to continue to speak to our own complicity in oppression, to continue to name that and to say that is really important. So thank you, Nicole. Really appreciate you saying that and speaking up. Okay, and then this will be our last one, because then I just realized it's 11. We gotta go.
I'll make it super quick. I think, thank you, of course, thank you. And so just kind of pulling on the thread that Sabrina shared. So in local Denver politics, I'm in Colorado, Ashleigh and I are kind of neighbors. There's a 21-year-old Black man who was elected to the school board district here. His name is Tay Anderson. I'll type it here. He has just defunded police, and his whole platform is the school to prison pipeline and removing SROs from schools. And so he is working with other local politicians in major cities to create a national movement. And so his social media platforms, both on Facebook and Instagram, he is directly linking up with other politicians. And so, for instance, if you are in San Francisco or Reno, Tay Anderson is a good resource to where you can start to know faces and names of people who are actively working towards these things in your community, and reallocating police funds to, like Sabrina said, to things like establishing mental health support in schools instead of police officers. And he's just a really passionate, he's a face to this movement in my community, and is looking to amplify faces of this movement in other communities as well. So just wanted to drop that nugget there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. It's great. It's really great. So it's, you know, I want to be mindful of time. It's after 11. So we only heard from a couple of folks, but, you know, I highly encourage you to continue to dive into what does it mean to be white, and how it is that we can continue to then look at that and then take some action to use the power and the privilege that we have to dismantle the power and the privilege that we have. We can't be silent, you guys.
I'm muted.
We can't sit on our cushions and take a little bypass on this one and just be like, oh, just let the feeling come and go. Don't let the shame and the guilt come and go without it going unnoticed and spurring you into action. Have the conversations with your family. You're gonna have to get on the battlefield if you really want this to move in a new direction. We really, really have awakened to the ways in which we're all one, and yet we're still living separate like this. It's not actually fully integrated. And no one is free until everyone is free. And I just, if we have been sitting on our cushions and meditating and practicing and doing what we have for 20 years, and we're awakening to our own complicity and effect that we're having on our own oppressive tendencies, and we cannot use our voices and the social platforms that we've used to promote ourselves and our businesses and all that kind of thing to say that Black Lives Matter right now, something's not working in your practice. So yeah, the work of Ibram Kendi, do that work. It's the first step. Confession is the first step as white people.
We can create a space also for next week as well, to continue sharing and confession. I think it would be a really beautiful, maybe, Meg and I will talk about how we want to begin, but it could even be a beautiful way to start next week, to let it start with your guys' voices to share. I think the wider the conversation is, and the different ways that we can hear this, these confessions from each other and one another, for me, it just helps pick up the blind spots, just to reflect, be reflections and be mirrors for one another. So we can also create the space if you guys, anyone who didn't get to share this week and wants to share next week, for that to happen and onwards. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And before this becomes just like the white confessional every week, like let it spur you into action, because it's just like, it's not like right now we're going to say, okay, so now you confess this and you're going to be absolved of your sins. The sin is missing the mark. We're not absolved. We are still missing the mark. And the confession is just the beginning of starting to try to hit the mark, and get us back on track. So, we are not going to be absolved, and we're also not going to be cheered for coming to these realizations. Like, good for you. You know what I mean? It's like, so just there's that. And we will continue to go here. And, I love you all so much. And I'm so honored by your courage to step up and to step in and to use the boons that you've received from these practices. And if you're white, the privilege that you receive by just being white, to do for the highest, to make sure that we keep working and keep acting until we are all free. I love you.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you next week.